Y'all are sounding great. Donnie, thank you. Now, it's time to get serious. We're talking about our speaker. Many of you know him as a mild-mannered member, but really, he fights every day for your kidneys, a urologist. He studied at Harding. He actually played soccer for Harding. 12 years or so studying at this point, but now he is with Nephrology Associates. That's an undercover word that has something to do with kidneys. All right. Somehow, he convinced the beautiful and saintly Martha Kellum, now Hovater, to marry him. They have produced 3 beautiful children. Katie and Jordan, twins, who were soon to be 6, and Elise, who's soon to be 2. Please help me welcome a man who took time off from filming the documentary, The Secret Life of Kidneys, Everybody Needs at Least One, Dr. Michael Hovater.
Thank you. It's close. We'll go with it. I'm not a urologist. It's all right. Details. I'm a nephrologist. I thought the Nephrology Associates clue might have guided him in that way. Urology is a similar field. They're surgeons.
I already have one instance.
What? Whoa. I don't know what that was. That was not part of the plan. I'm not sure. Not sure what that was. But thank you all. Glad to be here. I was here a year ago, back in June of 2015, and we talked about the Psalms at that time, and I really enjoyed it. And it's great to be back. And I love singing out of the songbooks. It's something I miss, something I grew up with. I'm 36 years old. I don't know, apologize for that or brag about that. I don't know which is more appropriate, but that's age is what it is. But for about the first 20 years of my life, I grew up singing out of the songbook. I grew up in Florence, Alabama, but over the last 15 or 20 years, that has become less and less the fashion or the way that we do things. But I do miss it, and it does bring back good memories. Florence is an interesting place to grow up. Florence is in northwest Alabama. It's in Lauderdale County, the northwestmost county in the state of Alabama. Southern border of Lauderdale County is the Tennessee River, and Florence is on the southern part of the county there on the river. And there's a lot of churches of Christ in Lauderdale County. Mostly small, and the one I grew up was fairly small, definitely not the smallest. So there were about, on any given Sunday, 150 to 175. It was pretty typical. When I was in high school, my brother and I looked at the phone books. That's also gone out of fashion. There were 70 churches of Christ in Lauderdale County back when I lived there, which is just astounding to me. And most of them are little county churches, little small churches. I don't know how it happened. There's some fascinating history there that is a mystery to me. But somebody did a lot of church planting in Lauderdale County. Well, T.B. Larimore probably did have a lot to do with it. I know him because I went to Mars Hill, which is the school, the small Church of Christ school in Florence, Alabama. I went to Mars Hill from preschool until 12th grade. Anyways, good memories. Thanks for singing that. I did really enjoy it. So this is kind of a big class and not really well suited for interaction. And I did not design my lesson for interaction. I haven't been here in a year, so I don't know how you typically do it. I don't know if it's typically a lecture-like class. In my mind, it's a lecture-like class. Russ sent me a text on Thursday. There he is. On Thursday saying, where are your slides? Or do you need some help from the tech arcs? And I was like, well, I hadn't really prepared anything like slides. So it's just me. And despite the fact that this goes against everything we know about education, doing a 30-minute one-sided lecture, that's what we're doing. And on the back of another one, it's probably not the best learning experience. So I say all that to say, if you have something to say, I'll welcome it. It'll break up the monotony for everything, and I'm sure you'll have lots to add. So help a brother out if you have anything you want to say or any questions. Raise a hand or just stand up or talk or whatever, and we'll chat. Now tell me about the tickets. I remember there being some sort of a giveaway, and I know it seemed like last year we did it on the front end. Is that at the end of class now? Okay, at the end of class. So what's our? We didn't talk about time. When do we need to stop to do all that? So stop before the, okay, well, he was going around telling people that I was going to talk about kidneys, so if we get off on salt and water homeostasis, we may be here a while, because I do get pretty excited about that stuff, and so we may miss lunch if we get off topic on that. But we're not going to talk too much about kidneys, unfortunately. We're going to talk, I titled my lesson today, Think on These Things, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I don't know exactly how long it's going to take, which is one of the reasons I ask about the time. We are getting ready to move. Martha and the kids and we have bought a new house, and we're very excited about that. We'll probably move within the next couple of weeks. We've started the process. We've moved some stuff. We got a bedroom set up over there. I have a little brother who is a freshman at UAB. When my older brother and I went off to college, my parents adopted. Actually, they got into fostering first and fostered a number of kids, and eventually adopted one of the kids that they fostered. And he's a freshman at UAB, and he's staying at my house right now, at the new house. He's doing a Maymester, one of those short semesters where he does like a 2-week class and sticking around. But they kicked him out of the dorm, and so he's kind of homeless and staying with other friends for about a week. And after we closed on our house this week and got the made sure the power was going to stay on and all that stuff, he moved over in the house, and it's nice having somebody there, frankly. So it's not an empty house. We'll move. We're also trying to sell our house. We've got we're collecting mortgages, which is not what we want to do right now. So we're under contract to sell our house, and we got the inspection back this week. And if everything goes well, we'll sell that soon. And we're kind of want to keep our stuff there in case it falls through, because the house shows better if you got furniture and it looks like somebody could live in the place. So we're in between a little bit. We live in a small house in Crestwood. I bought it when I started residency, or my wife and I bought it when I started residency at UAB. And at that time we had 0 kids. And we have 3 now, so we're kind of busting at the seams a little bit. And there's not really a good place to put a printer, and it was in the dining room was the guest bedroom. And the printer was in the guest room, but then we're trying to sell the house, so we put the guest bed in the shed, and put the dining table back in the dining room, and the printer ended up in Katie and Jordan's room. So when I finished up the lesson and wanted to print it up and kind of practice it with the notes, I couldn't really do that because the kids were in bed. So practiced a little bit with the computer, but it's different, of course. So we will talk about some of this stuff for a while, and at some point we will stop, and I'll let you know when we're there. I'm not sure how long that's going to be. We're going to start with the Psalm. Psalm chapter 1. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but are like the chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. But the Lord knows the way of the righteous. The way of the wicked will perish. And kind of what I'm keying on as we open up here is that the blessed man is the one who meditates day and night on the law of the Lord. Brother Lawrence lived in the 1600s. You may have heard of him. There's a kind of a somewhat famous book called The Practice of the Presence of God, which is a collection of letters written by him and other letters that have accounts of conversations that people had with Brother Lawrence. So he lived in France in the 1600s. He was born into poverty. Not a wealthy man or a well-educated man. He joined the army. He ended up having an injury and ended up having to leave the army because of the injury, and joined a monastery, not as a ordained person or a seminarian or a scholar at the monastery, but he worked in the kitchen. He was a cook and cleaned and stuff like that. But this book gained a lot of attention. The theme of it is that you can be in the presence of God all the time, not just during ritualistic religious times or pre-prescribed religious times. The Catholic Church, and particularly monasteries, have a lot of habits and rituals and stuff like that. But this book is about being in the presence of God no matter what you're doing. And he writes about like picking up a straw and thinking of nothing but Jesus. And it's fascinating and encouraging. One of the amazing things about the book, it arose out of the Catholic Church with all of its hierarchy, but it wasn't written by one of the scholars. It was written by one of the laity, and it emphasizes the point that not only can you commune with God or being the presence of God any time, but anyone can come to God at any time. In the beginning, it was Adam and Eve in the garden, and they were with God. And Genesis kind of tells us this idealistic story about God walking and talking with people. And then there was the fall, and sin entered the world, and there was separation between God and man. And God did come to some people and talked with some people, but things were different after the fall. God talked with Noah and later with Abraham, and gave them some instructions and led them along. And then there was Moses. Moses was one of the leaders of the people. He was also an intermediary. He interceded on behalf of the people. Moses, in a sense, he went to God for the people. Exodus chapter 20, when Moses comes down from the mountain with the 10 Commandments, he says, or the Bible says, "Now when all the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and they trembled. And they stood afar off and said to Moses, 'You speak to us and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us lest we die.'" And so the kind of the trend of the separation between God and man continued. Moses talked to God, and Moses talked to the people, and it went on like that for some time and for generations. God wanted to be with his people. God wanted to be the king, but the people did not accept that. 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 4 through 7. Reads, "Then all the elders of Israel gathered together, and they came to Samuel at Ramah, and they said to him, 'Behold, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the other nations.' Now this thing displeased Samuel when they said, 'Give us a king to judge us.' And Samuel prayed to God. And the Lord said to Samuel, 'Obey the voice of the people and all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them.'" And you can almost detect a note of sadness, or maybe not a note, but a strong sense of sadness in God when he says, "They have rejected me," when they ask for a king. And you can feel there's some emotion in that. God wants to be with his people, but a lot of the story of the Old Testament is the people rebelling and not accepting that and running from God. And the story of the children of Israel asking for a king is a large part of that story. We're not going to go through all that story because our time is short, but Jesus changed everything. The curtain, the veil in the temple was torn from top to bottom. It says in Matthew chapter 27, verse 51, when he died. Jesus gives us freedom. He gives us permission and ability and encouragement to go before God on our own. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 19 through 20. "Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the holy places by the blood of Jesus, by the new and living way that he opened for us through the curtain, that is, through his flesh, and since we have a great high priest over the house of God, let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, with our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water." We have confidence to enter the holy place because of Jesus. We can go before God. There's an interesting article I ran across this week in the New York Times called "The Mindful Child." It probably caught my attention because I have 3 little kids, and so I'm interested in, trying to figure out how to take care of them and how to raise them up and love them well. But it also caught my attention because I'm a Christian, and there's some interest in Christian meditation and stuff of that sort. The article said a few things about the benefits of meditation for kids. It talked about the improvements in executive functions like cognitive control, working memory, cognitive flexibility, and better math grades. Of course, that caught my attention. Man, I do want them to do well in school. There's another study that it quoted that talked about some of the bad things that meditation for kids kind of wards off: lowered aggression, lowered social anxiety and stress levels. And the article said it just kind of overall improves the attention and impulse control of kids. So, like any good dad, I took this new information to my research lab, which is to say, experiment on my kids. We have, there's millions of little social experiments running around out there called families, and we have one of them. We have an N of 3. We have three kids in the experiment, and we'll see how things go. It's too early to say right now. This is a longitudinal study. We've got years to figure this out. But anyway, so. And I was having kind of flashbacks when I was thinking about this, and I didn't really realize it, but my dad had kind of done some of the same stuff to me when I was a kid. My dad was a psychologist, and so the world was full of opportunities for experimentation. And he did mostly testing. He worked with the school systems for a long time, retired from that, and worked with DHR and did a lot of testing with the DHR, which is how he got into the foster care stuff, because he kept running into kids that needed help, and so they opened their home eventually. But he also did some counseling. He did cognitive behavioral therapy counseling, and he was real interested when I was a kid, at least it appears. He took an interest in hypnosis and self-hypnosis and biofeedback and stuff like that. And there's a whole literature out there that I'm not familiar with about that sort of stuff. But he would play with us and experiment with us and have us do some, he didn't call it meditation, but meditation exercises. He even had some cassettes that when we were, 10 years old or whatever, we had a little cassette player in our rooms, my older brother and myself. So he gave us like some cassettes that we could listen to as we were going to bed about, and they're kind of meditation exercises. They're self-hypnosis exercises about kind of calming down and self-confidence and realizing your potential and stuff like that. The stuff that dads did in the 80s, I guess, especially if they were psychologists. And it was great. I remember loving it. I still remember the way it made me feel. It made me feel calm and relaxed and kind of clear-minded. And these are there's a lot of benefits of that sort of stuff. This wasn't long after Richard Foster published his book, Celebration of Disciplines, which has brought a renewed interest in the spiritual disciplines, things such as fasting and meditation and that sort of stuff. And I don't think Dad didn't really follow that literature, wasn't into that. And the Church of Christ in Florence in the 80s wasn't really into that sort of thing. And the Church of Christ in Birmingham in the 2016s really isn't into that sort of thing too much, but it is a lot more than it was 20 years ago. But anyway, so it's something that I did as I was a kid and been playing with my kids. My kids love it too. They think it's the greatest thing. I mean, they're 5 now. The 2-year-old doesn't understand words very well, so she doesn't. She's not there yet. But the 5-year-olds, they love it. I was off work on Friday, and so I took them to school, and we listened to a short exercise on the way to school. There's kind of a breathing thing, and they thought it was great. They said it felt really good. They wanted to do it again. I was like, no, come on, kids, let's slow down. But they made me promise to do one again at bedtime. And then when I picked them up from school that afternoon, they wanted to do it again in the car. So we did a couple more. We actually did 2 in the car on the way home. And then I put Elise down for a nap in the afternoon, and they're out in the yard playing, and they wanted to do some more, so we did a couple more on the back porch in the afternoon on Friday, and then the promised one at night. We did it 6 times that day. That was not the plan, but I wasn't going to, I wasn't going to beat them back about it. So if you want to do this, New York Times says it's good for you, so we'll try it. But anyways, they loved it. It was kind of a fascinating experience this week. And kind of the type of meditation that's in the psychology literature that I know very little about, and the popular culture, what we hear a lot about of meditation comes from Eastern cultures and Eastern religions. And that type of meditation, a lot of that is about emptying the mind and creating space to come in touch with your breathing and yourself and the environment. And these are all good things, but I can't help but think about the parable of the return of the unclean spirit when I think about that kind of stuff. The unclean spirit who leaves. Matthew chapter 12 gives one of the accounts of it. Matthew 12 verses 43 through 45. The unclean spirit had gone out of a person. It passes through waterless places, seeking rest, and finds none. And then it says, I'll return to my house from which I came. When the unclean spirit comes, it finds the house empty, swept, and put in order. It goes and brings with it 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and they dwell there. And the last state of the person is worse than the first. Certainly that's not the point of Eastern meditation, but it certainly, there's some risk to just emptying the mind of bad stuff, but not filling it with good stuff. And at least in my mind, Christian meditation is about emptying the mind, but it's not just about emptying, it's about being filled with Christ and creating space so that you can have good stuff come into your mind and into your thoughts. So I told you that what I wanted to talk about was to think on these things was kind of what I titled it. Paul says in Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 9, rejoice in the Lord always, and I will say it again, rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be in you. So Paul tells the church at Philippi to think about good things, to fill your mind with good things. And I love that it's bracketed by 2 phrases of peace. In verse 7, he talks about the peace of God will guard your hearts. And then in verse 9, he says, the God of peace will be with you. So you'll be protected by the peace of God, and the God of peace will be with you. How different is this than the way of the world? The way of busyness that Brett talked about a little bit today, and apathy. There's this Winnie the Pooh DVD that I have heard probably 15 times. I've never actually seen it because we'll play it in the car from time to time. And so I'll hear, there's this Winnie the Pooh DVD, and I don't even know the name of it, but it's a story of this terrible creature called the Baksoon, or the Baxon. Christopher, is that his name? Christopher Robin. Christopher Robin left a note. He had gone to school, I think it was, and left a note saying, gone out, will be back soon. And Owl misinterpreted it to think that Christopher Robin had been captured by this terrible creature called the Baksoon, or the Baxon. And he describes it as terribly busy. That's Owl's description. They all kind of protract their feelings about badness onto this terrible creature as they make up whatever badness it may be. And the Owl's description was it was terribly busy. Richard Foster, in his book that we mentioned earlier about celebration of discipline, says in contemporary society, our adversary majors in 3 things: noise, hurry, and crowds. These days, being busy is almost worn like a badge of honor. We talk about how busy we are as it's a good thing, and there's certainly some good stuff about it. But and how often do I know that I have said, "Oh yes, it's just terribly busy." Justin was talking about that, talking about the busy seasons and how the busyness follows one season after another. They're all busy seasons. We live very, very busy lives. Some of what I want to talk about meditation is about just taking a break and taking a pause and creating space so that we can back away from the busyness and allow time for thought with God. That was the first bell, right? All right, that was quick. All right, we're on page 5. All right, we'll have to kick it up a notch. All right, so with this background, we'll now start the lesson. Next page. All right, so three kind of thoughts about meditation, and I'll say from the outset, I was hesitant to talk about this, but point number 1 is it's easy. It's not for the super spiritual or the elitist of the church. This isn't necessarily for the. I mean, it is for the Brett Walters and the Butch Wares of the world, but it's not just for them. It's for us too. It's for the laity. It's for the working people, the retiree, the cooks, and the folks who work in the kitchen in the community. Not just for the leaders of the church, the preachers, the elders, the seminarians, and the scholars. I love those guys, Butch and Brett and those guys, and I have a tremendous amount of love and respect for them, but this isn't something that's just for them. Every one of us can go to God and spend time with Him. The veil has been torn. We don't have to have a preacher to intercede on our behalf. It's great when they do. I'm not opposed to that. I'm all for praying for each other, and I encourage that and love that. But we don't have to have somebody to go to God for us. Paul says in Romans chapter 8 that Jesus intercedes for us, that Jesus is our intermediary now. And then he goes on to say that nothing can separate us from the love of God. The truth is that God desires our fellowship. So if we give Him some time, He will meet us. So number 1, it's easy. It's for everyone. Number 2, the aim is to learn to practice the presence of God so that through a few specific exercises, we can become more aware of God's presence in our everyday life. Ultimately, we don't want the presence of God to be an exercise that we just do for 5 minutes, but we want it to be a habit and a part of our lifestyle so that our communion with God becomes more and more continuous. Easter meditation talks about mindfulness and being mindful of your breathing, your senses, and nature, and that sort of thing. Christian meditation is also about being mindful, but it's about being mindful of the presence of God and being in awe of the presence of God, whether it's in nature, or in yourself, or others around us. Abraham Heschel, the Jewish theologian and writer, said, "I did not ask for success. I asked for wonder, and you gave it to me." And he wrote several books about being in awe of God's creation. Christian meditation is about asking God for wonder. All right, number 3, meditation is not about escapism. It's not about trying to get away from our worries. Ephesians chapter 5 warns, don't get drunk on wine, but be filled with the Spirit. This isn't about escaping. There are numerous vices that people use to help escape from worry and concern, such as alcohol or drugs or food or the phone or the computer.